Good evening. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education on Monday, October 12th. And if you please join us for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Madam Superintendent, do you have any comments for us this evening?
I do. I have a couple of brief comments. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everybody for their participation today in our remote learning drill. We know that we continue to have shortages of devices as we wait for those to come in from the manufacturer, but knowing what we can't control, we felt like it was important to practice what we could control. We had a couple of things that we've run into that I'm happy that we exposed now that we've only had one day out rather than being out for 2 weeks. One was in the schools we have carts of Acers, and we've been furiously converting those into Chromebooks because previously they were locked down and they only worked in our buildings. You couldn't take them out and have them work in another network in your home. And while we created those as quickly as we can, we sometimes have not done the best job of labeling those for when we put them back in the schools. So some of the schools inadvertently gave out the Acers instead of the Chromebooks for on-site students who are going home. So we'll have a better labeling system for knowing which ones of those have been converted. Overall, we had a pretty good experience. We sent out a thought exchange this afternoon one for all of our staff and then a separate one for all of our parents. What went well? What do we need to improve on? Obviously, we remain in the green as a county, but given Berkeley status and the surrounding county status, we have to be prepared to do that quickly and to do it well. And the best way to do that is to practice. So thanks to everybody for their help in making that work. We also are prepared to send out later on this week. We are prepared to send out questionnaires to families asking about their requests for second semester. That obviously, when we've really started to hit our stride for virtual and on-site, is making people anxious. It was an enormous upheaval. There's some fear that we will have another enormous upheaval. And what we've committed to is the reason that we're doing well is because we were very conscientious and maintained some pretty strict protocols, and we can't sacrifice those protocols. So we will take those requests. We will review them in light of the space and the staff and the safety protocols that we have set up. And we will come back with recommendations on who and how we can accommodate under what circumstances. Those may not include students going to the same school or with the same teacher or having the same schedules. However, we're willing to take those requests, and to the extent they can be accommodated and keep children safe, we'll do that. But we can't compromise at this point and do anything that would jeopardize us being able to continue with an on-site program. So we'll keep the board updated as we bring those requests in and set those deadlines.
Well, because can I ask a quick clarifying question on that, is that if the guidelines don't change at the state level as far as how many kids we can have in a certain space and blah, 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 the issue is also going to be where are they going to go? Is that right? Correct?
Absolutely, ma'am. But to your point, both physical space and staffing for those. One of the reasons that we've maintained what I think is a pretty exemplary record in terms of safety is because we've had the space to spread out. We've been very vigilant about our PPE and significant shifts in that there's a limitation to how much space we have and how many staff that we have. Now,
Right.
if we have a virtual teacher who's teaching a virtual class and a portion of those students want to go back and we have that in another classroom, we may be able to do some shifting around to accommodate some of them because that teacher is in an empty classroom
Right.
teaching a virtual class. There are limitations to that, however, because our virtual classes are maximized classes. All of those students couldn't simultaneously come back in the same classroom because we can't accommodate that.
Right.
So, we wanna make sure that we maintain what we've had and, help folks recognize that, by keeping those safety standards, that may mean placing some limitations, on when and where and how folks can move, so.
Okay.
But until we get all of those, requests and make sure that parents and students and staff understand very, very clearly, some very strict parameters that would accompany that, we'll move forward very cautiously. We're not going to jeopardize the safety gains that we've had.
Right.
That would just be a travesty after all the work we've put into it. What I would like to do, at this point, because this presentation is about our reentry, and as we've progressed, it's moved more from talking about our on-site and our safety program to talking about our virtual program. I have to give full faith and credit to Matt Wink and Jeremy Brock and Nikki and Michelle Cantley over at Charlestown Middle School. They put together a quick presentation to show all of the target elements of the Jefferson Virtual Academy, to explain to parents and show them what it looks like in real time in video format. And I thought, better than me sitting here and explaining how the program is going, it might help for you to actually see it in action. So a lot of this right here, other than that beautiful, nice, warm fireplace on a cold, sprinkly night, these are the things that they're striving for in a virtual academy program. They want it to be very consistent across classes so that it's easier for kids and families to navigate, that they can be both self-paced daily. They have live instruction from a teacher, that it's both interactive and engaging, and it's both live and on demand, so that there's a mix of those things for families.
Dr. Gibson, are you sharing your screen with?
Oh, am I
Zoom
not?
meeting? No.
Apparently, I am not. I apologize.
That's
Hold
okay.
on. Oh, Miss Cantley, your beautiful presentation is wasted on me right now. I'm sorry. Let me go back to Zoom. And why isn't my phone blowing up with text going, Dr. Gibson, you're not actually sharing your screen despite your enthusiasm?
Because they couldn't see what I could see, so.
Ah, okay. Now I am
Sorry.
screen sharing.
There you go.
Okay, so back to, there we go. Back to that, and I don't know where they found that cool picture of a panther, but that's awesome. The beautiful fire to which I was referring. And when they're looking at the self-paced lesson decks, when they are asking students and families to be able to complete work on demand, they're being very consistent about the labeling, the coloring, and the format of what they're asking them to do. And organizing a Google Classroom so that the students understand it is pretty crucial. So I'm gonna let Miss Henry very briefly explain how to find and use her Google Classroom, which I think will be nice. Oh, Emma? Okay. Okay, not helpful. Sorry.
You're good. It's asking me to unmute. So what's super frustrating is that this worked perfectly this afternoon. Absolutely perfectly. So, very, very frustrating. We came in here, we practiced it,
Let's go back into.
it worked
Zoom.
great. Mm-hmm.
And, nope, that's fine, it's supposed to be No, mute and unmute.
I did. I'll do that again.
Okay, good.
So let's try that one more time. See if we can get that to play. Is that Miss Cantley going, oh dear God, well, how could you possibly be messing with my? Okay. So I apologize, I'm not going to,
It worked earlier.
Miss Henry is doing an unbelievable job on this of explaining Google Classroom and how it works and how to navigate it, and I am going to try to temper my complete and utter frustration at them creating this and you not being able to hear it.
Put yourself over here and see if it's
Yeah.
playing on the HDMI. Nope. Click on that,
Mm-hmm.
and then click on the Intel audio. And then unmute it.
And click on the Google Slides presentation.
Oh, Jason, you're my hero.
Okay, once you go back to Google Slides
Okay,
presentation,
so
I
we're
have given an
going
example
to
pacing guide
pause this,
with K1.
and we're gonna go back because it's only a minute and a half, and it's
Hi,
incredible.
my name is Mrs. Henry, and I'm going to show you today how easy it is to use and access the lesson plan template for our class. So first, when you get to Google Classroom, you'll choose our class period. Once you get into your class, you'll choose the classwork tab, okay? You'll see everything is labeled and organized. The Teams meeting link is right underneath here. The meeting recording, so if you miss a class, you need to watch a recording, they're all here listed by date. And then the weekly lesson plan, or in this case, it's 3 weeks at a time, is listed here. Now, all of these assignments that are listed under the weekly lesson plan are here just as a formality, as I have to upload the assignment here in order to get the link to put it into the lesson plan. The students can access everything from one spot, and that's this lesson plan. They do not need to go into all these individually. You'll open up the assignment and click on the Google Slides presentation. Okay, once you open up the Google Slides presentation, I have given an example pacing guide with K1, and the student then would do the slides that are listed underneath K1, and then day 2, and the student would do the assignments listed underneath slide 2, okay, and then day 3, and day 4, day 5, and so on, okay. So this helps students to pace via how I think it should be worked on, but they can also pace themselves. So if they know they're gonna miss a day of class, then they can work ahead to go and get ahead. Or if they just need a break, then they know they need to continue from where they left off, and they can work a little slower or a little faster. We just know that the end date for this is October 12th, and I need to change that here. So the end date is October 12th, and the students know that's just everything has to be done by then. Okay, I hope you find this tutorial helpful and that you'll find that the lesson plan template is organized and supposed to be here to help. Thank you very much.
So the point of these, and I'm gonna show you a few more, is to very briefly in a minute or two show parents how to utilize this technology. So if you look at Mr. Vogel's 7th grade class, you'll see that he has the exact same format so that when students come in here, they can see what the standards are that they're supposed to learn. And then with each one of these, they have a set of tips and slides. So if I were to click into this image, it will take you to an article on, and I actually saw an episode on this, interestingly enough, this guy who built that in his backyard and the process that he used to figure out all of the dynamics for that. And then in each one of these, it contains links. When you click on this, it will begin to show you a YouTube video on potential energy and how to utilize that. So all of these maintain a degree of consistency and pretty engaging links throughout them. This is another 7th grade teacher who, same format, you're looking at, here is what we're going to learn about today. Here are my expectations of you, what I need you to learn. Here are your directions, and here's some engagement for you. Usually it's videos, sometimes they're interactive games that the students can play, things that they can explore for further information and to go a little deeper. Typically, what they have is also an action item where, like on this one, you watch the video and then she has a LinkedIn graphic organizer that I'm not in her class, so I can't go into that. All of them, you have to be on that teacher's class in order to be able to see it. So this is a clip from a math teacher's class where she is then teaching what you just saw were the asynchronous or the on demand, so that they have a level of consistency and families can work through those at their own pace. We also have the live classes, or synchronous as we call them. So you're going to see some clips from her class and her presentation.
For class today, one thing that I asked you guys to do besides taking the quiz was I also asked you to finish out the slideshow that was in Google Classroom. So what I'd like to do right now is go over some of those facts. I do have one really, really cool thing to share today, and that is my smart board is finally working. Woohoo! That means that while I am teaching some of the information that I'm going to be doing, I don't know if you can see over my shoulder, but you guys are actually up on my screen right here too, so you can kind of like wave at yourself.
I love his enthusiasm at seeing
Right
himself.
now is you should see our classroom. Notice I've added my name to the top of our classroom because Mr. Wink asked me if I'd do that. I said sure, so there it is. In a little bit later today, your assignments are going to pop up. The assignments for tomorrow first. Remember when we see the word module. Anytime we see module in this class, module means our set of Google Slides. Module means our set of Google Slides. Last week we went over green, blue, blue, yellow. Then I asked you to do purple, orange, and light gray for today. I asked everybody to write a list of any 10 integers into your math notebook. Now, hang on. Everybody was supposed to do this, so what I'd like to do right now is I would like one volunteer to tell me the numbers that you picked. I don't want them in order. I just want the 10 integers that you picked and that you wrote into your notebook. Just 1 second, please. Hang on.
So,
All right, hang on, wait. I gotta stand up. All right, here we go. We're gonna test this out. I can see Madison in the corner, and Madison's gonna give me her list of numbers. Ready?
so I put -5,
Negative
4,
5,
4,
+4,
+8,
+8,
-11,
-11. Okay, guys, what you should have in your math notebook, just a quick unshare really quick. Okay, I know that my face is really close to the screen, but I'm kind of like bent over so excited about this. Everyone in your notebook, you should have a number line written down. Okay? Right now. We're doing this right now. Put today's date at the top. Today's date is October the 6th. We've got a review. We are going to solve one of the problems that you were asked to do from your Google slideshow. We're going to take Madison's numbers and we're going to follow the instructions. Remember, here are the instructions. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, that's not it. Silly, Mrs. Callrider. What are you doing? Write a list of any 10 integers in your math notebook. We're taking the 10 that Madison selected. Include some positive and some negative. Thank you, Madison. You followed instructions. Now we're going to order those from the smallest to the biggest. From the smallest to the biggest. So here we go, friends. Anytime that I am ordering numbers, okay? What you should be able to see right now, again, are my numbers on the screen. Anytime you are ordering numbers, the smaller numbers are to the left number line, and the bigger numbers are to the right. It's a way of keeping track. If we have a big, long list of numbers, if you just make a little mark, now notice I'm not crossing them off completely. I want to make sure I can still see what the number is. But this is a way to keep track of it. And I'm moving through, and I'm just graphing all of these numbers on a number line. to show you is, do you see the orange slide? Hopefully when everybody got to the orange slide, they were just like, wow, this is easy. There's nothing I have to do right here. You're right. Reflect means to think back. And what I wanted you to be able to do in this particular slide is when you clicked on that link went to the Google form that we already talked about, and it had the answers in it this time. And the reason was is to use that as a reference. Notice that one of the questions says, do you think you could teach it to somebody else? Any of you ever talked to your pet or to your stuffed animals about like something going on? Yeah? I talk to my dogs all the time. Ryan, you have a new cat. You can talk to that kitten all the time, okay? But I talk to my dogs sometimes when I just need to discuss what happened, and they just kind of look at me like, okay, but they don't understand me. But have you ever had that feeling that after you say it out loud, you either feel calmer if it's an emotional issue, or if it's something you didn't understand, when you talk about it a little more, you understand it a little bit more? Guess what? It works that way with math, folks. If you are doing your math sometime and you aren't sure about something, try saying it out loud. Try teaching it to a younger brother or sister. Try talking to your dog or Mr. Fluffy or stuffed animal or something. I am not, you are not, is there anyone who is watching right now that does not have their textbook, that does not have their Go Math book? Madison, I know you were able to get yours. Does everyone have their math book? Because I did not post the pages, but I will if someone needs them. Everyone has their math book. All right, fantastic. Please go ahead and you are dismissed. Go ahead and finish your math. Make sure you take notes in your math notebook and come back prepared for, what's today's date? Thursday's class. We're gonna play a game, start new material, and you will get your new module on Thursday. Okay?
Bye.
Bye.
So as you can see, you have to bring a whole lot of enthusiasm when you teach virtual, because you have kids who are in their home environment, and certainly it is I do believe it takes a lot more out of the teachers. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on this evening. But if you saw the amount of slide decks, the embedded links, the activities that have to be provided, the intensity of providing materials for students in a remote environment is significantly heavier than in a live environment, when you can just reach out and put those out in front of kids, and to maintain their attention and their focus during those, and then provide them with things to do when you're not with them. So you can see the amount of time and intensity that it's taking for that transition. So I just want to thank Charlestown Middle School for actually giving us a great opportunity to see that. As you can see, we've gotten some good feedback and some appreciation from parents, which we deeply appreciate, that they feel their children are getting a quality education and that they are being well served. So that is my update for today.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve the regular board meeting minutes held September 28th, 2020?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes from September 28th?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, citizens' comments. This evening, we do have 2 citizens' comments, and let me set my timer here, hang on. Just a reminder that you are limited to 3 minutes. I won't start the timer until you actually start, so we'll have to make sure that you're unmuted, because I think you're on the Zoom call. You're not here. The first one up is Joe Thompson. Mr. Thompson, are you there? Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I just wanted to come before the board. I'm a parent of 2 children in the Jefferson County school system. One's in elementary and one's in middle school. I also work in IT, so, you know, the company I work for had to make the same pivot from in-person to virtual. We had to reorganize all our customer meetings, all our internal meetings, all our events. So I'm talking from a place of knowledge when I talk about the issues that I've seen with the virtual instruction in Jefferson County. At the beginning of the school year, you know, I want to go back a little bit. There were various assurances that were made that we would get info before the school year began, that everything would be worked out. The school year started and we kind of didn't get info. We got some very rudimentary information, and that was the most that we got for a long time. And so we've had a lot of parents who have self-organized and formed their own groups online to share info, share technical tips, because they're not getting it from the school system. And what they are getting is partial and contradictory, and sometimes the things they're told just don't work. There needs to be some kind of comprehensive plan by the board from the top down, not bottom up where the parents come and bring their problems piecemeal. Something the board needs to do is top down, go out and take a full accounting of all these things that are going on that parents are having difficulties with, students are having difficulties with, and teachers are having difficulties with, in doing this virtual instruction and address it comprehensively. Going a little more into detail with that, there's a lot of technology in use, there's a lot of applications, but there is very little consistency that I've seen with how they're used, by which I mean not only how each teacher uses them from class to class, but also which things are in use in a given class. A lot of families are having technical issues, whether that's just a lack of knowledge of how to submit work, leading to a lot of students getting zeros. There's tons and tons of stories of very good students who know the material, who are doing the work, who are turning it in, and they're still getting zeros on things. Now, whether that's an issue with the platform, or whether it's an issue with the students' or parents' knowledge, to me that doesn't matter. Because if you have problems that widespread, it indicates an issue that needs to be addressed from the top. There's no single sign-on, so the last info that I saw, there's a whole list of applications that students have to remember what their individual passwords for all these applications are. There should have been single sign-on so they can log on once and just be logged in everything they need to use for the rest of the day. There's a lot of technical infrastructure. I know there was still some conversation about laptops that have not been gotten in, and they're kind of scrambling to address that. I know shortages of everything, but it feels like at this point we should have paid some kind of fill-in better than what we're doing, because we have a lot of students that I'm hearing about, they are driving around and using hotspots in their family's car. And that's just not tenable. That's not something that can be allowed to continue for any length of time.
Mr. Thompson, that's
And
exactly.
the last thing I want to go into is classroom policy. I'm hearing a lot of reports of inconsistent policies on grading and assignments and due dates from teacher to teacher to teacher. This is a time when we...
Mr. Thompson, that's,
Yeah.
your 3 minutes are up. If you could just wrap up in one sentence or so, I'd appreciate it.
I'll wrap up very quickly. We've been asked to give the board and the teachers grace, and I'm asking for them to give parents and students grace and not be so inflexible about deadlines, and maybe be a little more lenient on those issues.
Thank you. All right, next up is Jennifer Vigil.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I speak tonight as a parent of elementary students. I first want to thank Dr. Gibson for providing our county with choices for determining what we as parents felt was or is the best for our children's education. I know it's not easy and truly commend you for your dedication. Second, I'd like to thank all the teachers in the county, teachers in person, teachers teaching virtual, and teachers who are doing both. Your hard work and passion for the students is not going unnoticed. Lastly, a thank you to all the other staff members of the county, service personnel, school administration, special education, speech, occupational therapists, and anyone else I may be missing. Thank you. I have 3 children, all in elementary school at South Jefferson Elementary. 1 who is full-time virtual and 2 that are in person. I've been asked by many why I chose virtual for one and in-person for two. Here's my answer. My oldest son has ADHD and learning disabilities. He also has coughing asthma. He struggles with inconsistency, and after partnering with his school support team, his pediatrician, and his allergist and asthma doctor, it was determined he would do best with virtual. We are officially in week 6, and we are still getting into a routine. His teacher is amazing, and she's still trying to figure out what works best and what doesn't. However, I truly question the quality of education he is receiving. There's no hands-on tasks or experiments, one-on-one guidance, and a ton of platforms that we require our children to use, which has become a problem. My other 2 children who are in person thrive in school. They are able to socialize, perform hands-on activities, use paper and pencil, color, glue, etc. Even eating lunch in their classroom is fun and exciting. Their teachers have been able to tweak their lessons to make changes that normalize school even when it's different, which shows me as a parent how much these teachers are embracing this change. As a parent, I speak to the virtual drill today. Some may say it was great, some may say it wasn't. Everyone will take today's drill and push it to the sides. Today's drill was not productive, and here's why. My son, who is already virtual, continued on his day for half of it. My other 2 that attended in person spent 30 minutes on Zoom and then did 15 minutes of work that I had to personally help them with. We had to print the work, we had to take pictures and send it in. There was no routine or continued learning. My children did 45 minutes of work today, but the county considered it a half day. They asked, when do we go back to school? They're ready to go back. My thoughts on virtual is that it doesn't work for everyone. When we address No Child Left Behind, how are teachers to learn where students may be struggling? How are IEPs being upheld? How are we testing? How can we challenge children? And how can we truly provide them with a quality education? Virtual is not giving children the proper education. The foundations of education are so important. I also hope that you take the thought exchange with an open mind, knowing that anyone can comment, even people out of state. Are we getting true feedback as a county for the students this drill was intended for? To end, I do thank you for all that you are doing. I again thank all teachers, administration, and personnel staff for making in-person amazing. Even the students can see and feel your passion. Please remember, children need a quality education, and the best way is to send them in person. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, consent agenda. Are there any edits to the consent agenda?
No, ma'am.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move, Oscar.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All right, all in favor of the consent agenda? Opposed? Thank you. All right. Unfinished business, presentation of selected policies, discussion and possible action.
Yes, ma'am. The board had asked that we return and present information regarding some of the policies that were recommended. These in particular having to do with administration, and so we went back and took all of the areas in which there were decision points within the state policy and pulled those out so that we could provide the board with that information, and they could then determine whether or not they wanted to make a decision or send it back out. So I will go through these, and the board can stop me at any point that they wish to have more information or make any changes. So one of the first points that we had under policy 1100, administration and county organization, was whether or not we would restrict employees to having no more than one supervisor. That is a choice that is an option. We felt, however, that it would be restrictive. We can't always predict what positions we may need, particularly in terms of split positions for efficiency. And when someone performs different functions in different departments, we want the board to reserve the capability of having them report to more than one supervisor to evaluate them in different areas, as long as we're clear with them about who is responsible for what. There are also options about whether or not the board has an intent to maintain their operational and technical staff with a high level of competence. I'm not sure why that is an option. And whether or not the superintendent can recommend to the board the employment of specialists or consultants to maintain or support programs implemented by the county in areas requiring specialized knowledge. We do have, in particular, technology and instructional programs that we sometimes have to recommend a consultant to come in and either train staff on those programs or to make modifications to them because we do not have the internal expertise. One of the next decisions that we had were one of the functions of the board is to work with us to set goals for the county. And the question was whether or not the board would be required to make all of these the superintendent's goals, or some of them can be county goals and some of them can be part of the superintendent's evaluation. Again, at every point we made the selection that gave the board the greatest amount of latitude, that didn't force them one way or the other, so that they had flexibility. And then there has to be a section that designates how the board will handle any disagreement. If there's a failure to agree on goals and objectives, the parties can either petition the state board to have someone facilitate, engage WVSBA, or create an entirely separate procedure. It was put in there that we would choose the West Virginia School Boards Association, given our affiliation with them and long-standing history.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So, why not leave the options open? The X's are the ones you want to keep, is that correct?
The X's are the ones you will select out of those. So for instance, if the board and the superintendent are unable to agree on the goals and objectives to be used, the parties will. You can do one of those three things.
Mm-hmm.
If you X all of them, then part of the concern is that you would have future boards, because it doesn't say that the board may do one of these three things. You're saying this is how we will resolve disputes.
Mm-hmm. So why don't we just change may? The parties may, and then we have the option of choosing which is appropriate, instead of eliminating two options.
Well, you would then have to have the board vote every time. If you as a board don't want to establish how you're going to resolve any impasse through that process. So if you choose establishing a specific procedure or selecting another third party, you are then gonna have to go back and write a specific procedure. But that, again, I am telling you what options that you have as a board, and then you can provide me as a board any direction that you so choose.
So I still don't see why we can't just change it to may choose one of the following. Instead of eliminating two options, we're forced to, we're stuck with just the one, and we don't know what could come up to make us not want to go that route. I mean, it looks like you would belong to the school administrators, is that right? Organization. So
It
I'm
says
assuming-
that you may engage the West Virginia School Boards Association and or the West Virginia Association of School Administrators to facilitate an agreement. Or you can establish a specific procedure or select some other third party. Again, I am conveying to you your options. If
Okay.
you as a board wish to select all of them, so that in the future, if there is some further dispute, that board comes back and says, okay, now we're gonna vote this is what we're going to use, perfectly willing to do that.
my other question about this slide is, it seems that it's been changed from shall to may, and there are some goals that you are required by the state to follow. Achievement, student achievement should be an objective. But if we were to change this, I don't know where it would be written that that's supposed to be an objective, to focus on student achievement, because it's being changed from shall to may.
What this does is allow you, if you are setting the superintendent's goals, you as a board have the flexibility to decide which ones of those you want to be part of the superintendent's evaluation. Yes, the state does designate that those should be student achievement goals. That one of them should be those.
But one of the things too that the state does is, irregardless of whatever goals that as a board we set for you, we have a scorecard. And part of, and a large piece of encompassing in the goals that we did this year as well as other years, such as we made the ELA goal, and then we made a math goal, and then how they line up. But that scorecard, we are scored on student achievement in various degrees every single year. So how we encompass those in there, I mean, it has to be, it's already written in the scorecard that every single county has to do that. And if you don't meet those standards in the scorecard, you actually can be taken over by the state as a county. So you don't really have a choice to do that. So the goals, whereas it's written may or shall, as far as student achievement, it can be written however it wanted to be. It wouldn't really have anything to do in some ways with the goals. It does, because obviously if we don't do well in that, our scorecard doesn't do well, we don't do well as a county, and then the state comes in and takes over. So when we did the goals, we encompassed that scorecard as well into the goals. So I don't know that, other than obviously engaging the school board association to ask them that. I mean, we've sat and had we have a meeting every year that, before COVID hit, for an entire school day, kind of hashing out how are we gonna put these goals together, what do we want them to be, and how does that go? And then we all kind of work together to decide what do we think are the best goals. So far, I think with our board or previous boards, I've never known a board, as long as I know, to not agree on goals where you had to go back and say, hey, now I need the state to come in and help me figure this out. I mean, I think, I don't see where either petitioning the state board to say, hey, come help me mediate, or to establish a specific procedure and another third party to break up. I don't know, I'm not really sure where that it would be an issue, but.
It's also a little dangerous to not have a set process in place, because this process is only gonna take place if there's no agreement. And if there's no agreement on putting the goals together, then there may not be an agreement on how to handle it. And so having a process is not a bad thing. And the superintendent's evaluation, that's not just based on goals. And you may not have seen the packet that the state requires us to fill out every year. And it's quite a packet on the superintendent's evaluation. It's not just, okay, has she met these 3 goals?
Yeah, the issue, I think the problem is that we don't see the original policies on these slides, and so you're left with trying to interpret, and that's been my concern, because the public hasn't seen. It's just assumed that these are policies when they're not, and if you look at the way that's written, it contradicts what I've read in this state code book, which you said that it's already out of date, even though it was just published, but it definitely has specific, that wording of shall and may changes the whole meaning. Mm-hmm. And without knowing the exact part of the policy that's being changed, it's hard to agree. And I'm only left to assume that that could try to supersede any of these state policies, when I know the state says you're not allowed to, but
Correct.
if the board isn't aware of all these policies, then things could slip through. So that's my concern about that, and it would just help to know what the current policies are, to know what's being changed. I mean, the second part looks like maybe that's the current policy, and that, the intention is to eliminate 2. but it's just hard to know, so that's all I have to say.
Okay. So in the next section for the annual evaluation of the superintendent, the board evaluating its own performance, then the board has to provide both an assessment of itself and assessing the progress of the school system. Again, in this case, we stated that the board would utilize every one of those options, that there's adequate and reliable data available on results to date of the county's goals or objectives. So assessment and evaluation can focus on how well the school system is accomplishing its goals or objectives. Evaluations or progress assessments of the school system's learning programs, as well as evaluations of key administrators and other staff, have been completed, so such data is available. The board uses this assessment evaluation time period to assess the effectiveness of the board as a whole, as well as each board member. And then they summarize and synthesize the data compiled from the evaluation of the superintendent, the board's self-assessment, and the evaluation data on programs and staff as reference information when determining the reasons for progress and or lack of progress toward the accomplishment of school system goals and objectives. Those are all important steps of the process, and so it's recommended that you include all of them in your self-assessment and superintendent evaluation.
And again, when we look at that scorecard,
It includes every
of
single
those.
one of those, yes ma'am. And to a certain extent, you are correct in that some of these are somewhat redundant. There are so many aspects of this that the state is going to supersede your local policy, however, comma. The process of assessing and evaluating the board, the superintendent, staff, programs, and resources shall not be considered finished until the county district school system goals, objectives, and the strategies and actions being used to accomplish them have been reviewed and reprioritized. There is apologize, it jumped. There is a section that says that the process of assessment and evaluation will not be finished until revisions have been made in light of what all the evaluation for that year has indicated. So essentially, you can make the decision that you've reviewed and reprioritized everything that's within that, or that your assessment and evaluation isn't done for the year until you've made revisions to all of those. Whether or not you then develop and implement a plan to improve your own performance, part of the thought process behind this is that you follow this process every year. In order to, you have to have some sort of end point and then a beginning point for the following year. You are always going to be reviewing data and making revisions and then deciding a new set of goals for the following year. So at what point do you cut off and say, I've completed this assessment and evaluation of my staff, the superintendent, the board, programs, and then close out this year and start the next one? And that's, again, at the will of this board. And the thought was, once you've reviewed everything and reprioritized it, if you're going to make revisions, that presumably those revisions are going to be your goals for the following year and start the next phase of the process as that continuous improvement process.
And we've done that before with previous goals, that we
Yes,
felt
sir.
like we're
Yes,
not
ma'am.
finished.
We
and-
have.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, we have. Conflict of interest. This is essentially the state's policy on acceptance of unsolicited gifts. You can have a zero tolerance policy of not accepting anything. This then means every time someone comes and drops off donuts for the teachers, or brings in some flowers for someone, essentially for the purposes of this section, the state's definition of nominal value means that the gift has a monetary value of $25 or less. That is a fairly ubiquitous standard. It has been for us for years. And we recommend that you keep it as one all the staff are familiar with and abide by very strictly.
I have a question, or this came up for the campaign for, election for the Board of Ed, I noticed some people got campaign donations, and I wondered how this policy related to that.
In terms of employees, officers, and agents receiving, gifts, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, we're not considered officers, agents, employees.
I would defer to, Ms. Sutton. However, I don't believe that this applies for, board members when they're running for office, but I can certainly,
Does it apply to board members, period, you know?
would you like to respond to that, Ms. Sutton?
The, election laws would apply to, a board member, running for office. And then, once you win, and then, the conflict of interest laws would take over.
So are we considered, employees, officers, or agents? Would this
Yes, you
apply-
all are.
Okay. And is there anything being changed here, or is this a new policy?
There is nothing being changed here. You simply have, anytime you have the authorization, if you want to set a standard that says, that either if you want to try to define nominal value as something differently, or if you want to say absolutely nothing, if someone brings in a pack of gum and drops it off, we're going to enforce that. I think that's unreasonable. This is the standard. It's been the standard. However, the board could look at changing it if they wished.
So you're just offering this as a suggestion if we wanna define that, that's all that is, it's just being added as an extra.
That language is straight from the Ethics Act and state law, $25 or less, and that's per year. So if you're at the State School Board Association meeting and you win a $25 gift card to Applebee's, that's your $25 for the year. So, vendors can't take you all out and, buy you dinner, or things like that. And, all of that is in the ethics laws and, state laws and state policy.
So, but it's the new version of the ethics laws, that's why this is presented here? Is that why you've Xed it?
No, it is part of Policy 1000 that covers all of those administrative policies, and we're issuing it in whole. That is one that you have made in the past, and what you asked was that we do a presentation about all of the decision points that you had.
Mhm. Yeah, I still don't understand why this is being presented. If it's already a policy and nothing's being changed, then why is this slide here? That's what I'm,
Because there's still a decision point, because you can have it where there's nothing, or there's $25.
Or there's
Okay.
$50.
Or,
That way
right.
You could make whatever you want.
Right.
okay,
we
that's
could-
what I asked before, and then I was told no, but maybe somebody misunderstood the question.
No, it's always
Okay.
been $25, that hasn't changed, that's already in our policy. But we have the option of changing it to making it nothing.
And when we had the discussion several weeks ago, it was rather than just say, okay, here we go, here's our policy, we're trying to update all the policies, and this is what we've been trying to do to make them consistent.
Yeah, I understand.
That's how we
I-
got to this.
It's just, I think my question was misunderstood, so I understand it now.
Okay,
And as always, if the board wants to put this out and submit, when we get any feedback from staff or from the public, if they submit legal questions or they call us and say, these are the questions that I have, then we can answer those. It's very helpful. In terms of the board actively seeking the best qualified and most capable candidate for superintendent, it may be aided in that task by a committee of board members, the services of professional consultants, the counsel of the outgoing superintendent, participation of members of the community, and the West Virginia School Boards Association. And in this case, the recommendation is, as you've used in the past, service of professional consultants, participation of members of the community, and the West Virginia School Boards Association. If the board wants to add or change any of those, that is another decision point. Employment of the superintendent, recruitment procedure shall be prepared in advance of the search and shall include the following. We included all of the options in terms of written job specifications, qualifications, proper state licensing, informational material for description of the district and its goals, opportunity for applicants to visit the district, the requirement that each selected candidate be interviewed by board members, wide geographic area, and consideration of all applicants fairly without discrimination. Again, surprised that that's an option. No person may be employed as superintendent in this district unless they have signed an employment contract with the board, which has to include all of these items. Now, employment of the superintendent, there are two things on here. One, the superintendent so appointed shall devote himself or herself exclusively to the duties of his or her office. In most superintendent's contracts, there is a clause that anyone seeking participation in any other organization has to seek the approval of the board chair. In this instance, for example, I serve on the board of directors for United Way. Before I accepted that nomination, I went to Ms. Skinner and said, I've been given this nomination, and I wrote to the board and said, this is how much time that I think it will take. Do you give me permission to participate? And you did. By closing this, you would close the board to having the option to have the superintendent participate in any other activity outside of their official duties. And again, any intentional misstatement of facts or materials in their qualifications would be grounds for dismissal. Again, superintendent shall be directly responsible to the board for the performance of the following duties and responsibilities. For every possible option, those were selected. It was our belief that you need to hold the superintendent to the highest standards, including implementation of the instructional plan, efficient use of resources, assignment of staff to achieve maximum benefit, progress of professional and service personnel, analyzing the results of the instructional program, recommending changes in instructional staffing patterns, working cooperatively with parents and community groups, with the board, administrative staff, and striving towards the highest standards of personal conduct, which I think that Ms. Harner should be the judge of. And then yet another full page of act as the chief executive officer of the board and nominating personnel to be employed. No person shall be employed except on the nomination of the superintendent. That one is not an option. That's actually in state code. Assign, transfer, suspend, or promote teachers and all other school employees. Report promptly to the board in such manner as it directs whenever the district appears to be failing to meet the standards for improving. Close a school temporarily when conditions are detrimental to the health, safety, or welfare of students. Certify all expenditures and payroll. Serve as the secretary of the board, attend all meetings, administer oaths, and examine witnesses under oath. Keep the board apprised continuously of any issues that affect you or schools. I also should be reporting to the board and providing you information on making decisions, exercise all other authority granted under statute. In the case of emergency, act in the best interest of schools. Not sure why I wouldn't. Again, in all of these duties, the only one that we felt was perhaps outside the scope of a superintendent was recommend for condemnation of buildings unfit for school use. We felt like there was probably a better position to designate for that than the superintendent, simply because that wouldn't nominally fall in their area of expertise. All of the rest of them continue to be reporting and instructional duties, including that, my personal favorite, performing all other duties as assigned by statute of the Board of Education. I believe that that is a particular favorite of Ms. Skinner's. Evaluation of the superintendent. Evaluations include all of these assessments, the degree to which, and this will speak to your point, Ms. Ogden, the superintendent is assessed not just on the accomplishment of their written goals and objectives, but also their success in improving student achievement generally across the county, which you will note is X'd here. Superintendent's success in improving student achievement specifically through the management and administration of low-performing schools. The superintendent's performance in community relations, school finance, personal relations, curriculum standards, and programs. The superintendent is to be evaluated in all of those areas, including overall leadership of the school district as indicated primarily by improvement in student achievement, testing, and assessment. The superintendent's performance of any of the other of his or her chief executive duties as delineated in their contract, and the degree to which the superintendent keeps the board apprised. All of those are part of a superintendent's assessment.
Can I ask you about slide 12?
Slide 12?
Yeah, you're going fast, I wanted to wait till you had a break. You said that it was just the one, but I don't know why you didn't check, no person shall be employed except on the nomination of the superintendent.
Because that's not an option. It's not an option to check it or not check it. That's a requirement.
Okay, so that's the, so the others are optional.
A board can determine whether or not they want that, the others to be, the other things to be in our local policy. I mean, some of these, again, you can decide whether or not to put certain things in your local policy, and them not being in your local policy won't supersede the fact that they're in the state policy and you're required to utilize them anyway. So I believe that we were on 17. Evaluation of the superintendent, the board. And this gives you the option of the board and the superintendent jointly shall determine the method by which the evaluation shall be conducted. That I did not check because I don't know that the board wants to tie themselves or future boards to that being a negotiation process with the superintendent rather than just a power and authority of the board. Currently, I don't determine the method of evaluation, and I don't know that you or future boards want to be bound by it being a joint process, but such methods can include self-analysis, which the board currently asks me to do, active participation of each board member, a recommendation from a board committee, a compilation of assessments. Did not check on a prepared standard form because once again, as long as you do it, we do currently use the WVSBA standardized form, but the board does not necessarily have to tie themselves to that particular standard form as long as they include all of the components. Evaluation interviews between the board and the superintendent during which no other business is discussed. In my interpretation of that, that would require an entirely separate board meeting devoted to nothing else, which again, I don't want to limit the options of the board in terms of flexibility. Input from other parties, citizens, school employees, and others about the superintendent's performance. You can utilize that evaluation to determine superintendent's salary, benefits, identify strengths and weaknesses in the operation of the county, determine means by which weaknesses can be reduced and strengths maintained, establish specific objectives to advance towards our goals, and improve your own performance as a public body ultimately charged with the educational responsibility of the county. The next section of this administrative code rests on the duties of the treasurer, in which case all of these are performance duties that in our county are the purview of the treasurer. The only one that is not checked, and this is a decision of the board, ensure that proper personnel are employed and position levels adequately maintained in the areas of his or her responsibility. Here, that is a purview of the board in terms of your decision about proper personnel. The treasurer can certainly make recommendations to the board, but ultimately it's your decision based on your judgment about the goals of the county and what you need to accomplish those, about position levels and maintaining adequate position levels in that area of responsibility. Non-discrimination and equal employment opportunity. We currently have this information in our staff handbooks on the county's website. We do not currently have it on each individual school website or in our county calendar. The county calendar is just a matter of space because we have it as a one-pager. We certainly can add that to each individual school's website should the board choose. We currently just don't propagate it on every single one of them. Termination of administrative contracts. These can be done based on a decrease in district enrollment, a return to duty of an administrator after a leave of absence. If an administrator serves at the will and pleasure of the superintendent and the superintendent recommends termination of the administrator's contract and the superintendent's recommendation is approved by the board. Financial conditions affecting the district, meaning that our finances, if the state pulls back money from us or we don't get the revenue that we anticipated. Reorganization and or consolidation of administrative functions. Student supervision and welfare, all of these are currently enacted in our system, and we think are important things to maintain in there. Most of them regarding association or fraternization with students at any time in a manner that may give the appearance of impropriety. Student supervision and welfare, again, these are, a student shall not be required to perform work or services that may be detrimental to their health. Administrators being strongly discouraged from engaging students on interactive media sites. This is always a sticky wicket for us. We want folks to build a relationship with kids, and more they're doing it in electronic platforms, but there is a fine line between teaching someone through a controlled platform like Teams or Zoom with the county account safety features on there and becoming friends with them on Facebook. So we make sure that we have criteria in there that are fairly strict about transmitting images of students and working with pre-approved materials from us rather than sending students things or soliciting things from them outside of our established curriculum. The next section is on weapons, which seems like an odd transition, but is part of the same section, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Loring to walk through those.
Thank you, and good evening. As I mentioned in the previous board meetings, is that these policies have already been approved by our Board of Education, and since the approval of those, there have been a couple updates to these policies. In July 2020, Neola updated policy 3217 and 4217, and they're exactly the same policies. It's just one is referenced in the professional employee section, and then the other one is in our service employee section. And the change was based on Senate Bill 46, where they added pepper spray to the list of deadly weapons. And you can see the changes here are listed in red. So what's in black is what you had approved, and then the red section are the changes. And as I mentioned, pepper spray was added to that.
and that's really all the update for 3217 and 4217. The next section is 4165, and that's the use of EpiPens by our personnel. And this policy was also approved by you and is currently in our active policy sections. We had an update in July 2020 as well. And what the change was there was a duplication of a bullet. So the second and the third bullet was exactly the same. So our policy update here for you to review is the deletion of the duplicate point.
Okay, so all of those are posted up, and we can put those back out for another 2 weeks for the board's review, public's review.
Are there any questions or discussion about the policies that we went through?
So, if we vote to put it out for 2 weeks, it comes back, and then
we vote to approve it.
when do we, make our comments? Like the slide that I said, the 3 things, and at what point do we make any suggestions for changes?
We have the ability to make comments the same way the public does, and that'll be captured by, I don't know whether Ms. Loring's gonna do it or Mr. Dilly's gonna do it, but somebody will, capture those comments, and then we'll get those, and we can discuss it at the next meeting when it comes back for approval.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is there a motion to put did you have something else?
No, I'll make a motion to put it out for.
For public comment for 2 weeks? All right, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor of putting the presented policies out for a public comment for 2 weeks?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you.
Thanks for that, that was great. Everybody who worked on that, Dr. Gibson, Amy.
Thank you.
All right, new business, COVID-19 response compensation.
At the last board meeting, we presented, as we always do to the board, our end of the year financial reconciliation, where we had tied out what our spending and our income were for the previous year, which we had been there was a lot of uncertainty about regarding COVID. And one of the things that we discussed at that time was the sheer volume of resources that our staff were expending in response to the COVID crisis. Everything from our folks who were at home using their own printers and ink, from our staff who were paying for childcare so that they could come in and do extra training, from folks who were, changing their, all of our staff had to make pretty significant changes in their workload. If you were a cook, you weren't just cooking and providing meals in one location. You had to come in and rework your entire system, because now you were both providing meals on site and you were providing them out in the community for virtual, and you were doing both of them in a brand new way. If you were teaching, as you just saw, the amount of change that these teachers had to invest in. So one of the suggestions was that there were federal funds that were allocated called COVID CARES funds. Those funds were allocated to school systems for their response to the COVID crisis. Now, we submitted to the state a drawdown of those funds. It was just under $1 million, I don't have it in front of me, a little over $950, $960. And at the time, what we did was we were eligible to apply for an additional technology grant. However, we weren't eligible for that application until we had submitted to draw down all of that COVID CARES funding. So we went through all of the criteria, and at the time, PPE, our cleaning supplies, laptops, all of those, And we took all of those that we had funded out of your general fund, out of local dollars, and we submitted those for reimbursement through the COVID CARES Act. So that replenished our general fund dollars. The suggestion for the board is that we provide compensation, a sum of money. The board has the legal authority to do an allocation. They have the authority to allocate a sum of money to a person for a very particular purpose, okay? And that purpose in terms of the response to COVID, we believe is fairly ubiquitous. Our service staff, our teachers, our folks in the buildings, they have expended a lot in terms of time, in terms of energy, in terms of their own finances in responding to this crisis. And regardless of how much PPE or how many laptops or how much cleaning supplies, none of this would have happened without their effort. It's not things that are going to get us through this crisis, it's the people. And so the suggestion is that we compensate and allocate to each one of these individuals the equivalent of 4 days worth of their pay, which would be at $125 a day, for a total of a one-time $500 allocation for the purpose of reimbursing them for the particular COVID response duties that they fulfilled.
I have some questions. Is it, are you done talking?
Apparently, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
I thought that it was all teachers and support staff that would be getting this 500, correct?
Yes, ma'am, all teachers and all support staff.
Okay, and this was money left over from the COVID CARES Act funds, correct?
Okay, no, ma'am, it's not money left over from the COVID CARES Act fund. The COVID CARES Act reimburses school systems for expenditures for their COVID response. We turned in expenditures to draw down the entirety of the COVID CARES Act funding, money that we had already expended on PPE and temperature scanners and disinfectant and laptops. So all of that money came back to us. Those were from general funds. And then once we drew down that COVID CARES funding, that gave us the status to apply for the technology grant, which we were competitive and won, to bring another $500,000 into the county for laptops.
Okay, and so you're using the 500,000? I don't understand, because last time, I just asked if it was legal to use that COVID CARES money to give the bonuses, and you said yes, that
Yes,
somebody
it is.
had looked into it, and you would supply that, and I never received anything, so I don't know who is approving it. And I just want to get clarification that, yes, this is the same thing, because now it sounds like the money's coming from something different. Is it still the COVID CARES funds that would be used?
So I will explain it as carefully, and then you convey to me at what point it conflicts with your understanding.
Well, do you have the verification that it's legal?
The verification that it is legal is that you are expending local general funds, which you have the legal authority. And perhaps Ms. Sutton would like to weigh in on this regarding the board's ability to expend local general funds on allocating sums of money to our staff for a particular purpose.
The board does have significant local authority with regard to its funds, and unlike federal relief in the past, the whole supplant issue doesn't come into play. So where you use CARES Act funds to pay for certain things, or payment of personnel, buying equipment, that freed up money in your general funds. So, those general funds were, did not need to be used for that purpose any longer. So now, the allowance for the employees would come out of the general fund, to which the board can expend, for legal purposes.
So it has changed, I think, from the last meeting, it sounds like. My question is, how do we know that we're not gonna need more PPEs or maybe vaccinations? You know, should they become available for students that maybe can't afford them? Because it just seems that we don't know where we are in the pandemic, and why would we use this money now? It would be wonderful to assure our teachers and support staff money, should it be available in this fund, but we have to do this election, the levy and the bond, and you know, if it doesn't pass, we've spent this general fund money with, it just seems a little bit premature to me without, it just sounds like it, and I just, maybe I'm missing something, but it would be wonderful to guarantee them that should that money be available, it would go to them. And on a regular basis, is, you know, I had mentioned that last time. I mean, you know, paying for teachers or, you know, staff to get the testing, the COVID testing. I don't know if their insurance covers it or if we're already paying for that, but we just don't know what's gonna happen. So, because of the pandemic, that's the way I see it.
Thank you for that. I would say that number one, the way, regardless of the length of this pandemic, the only way that we will successfully navigate it is with our staff, regardless of any other things that we have. We do already pay for testing, and as we presented to you in the previous budget, we allocated funding for this out of the general fund and continue to maintain both the one-to-one laptop initiative and a carryover amount of $4.3 million, which is in keeping with our previous carryover amounts from non-pandemic years. No, I certainly cannot predict the future nor know what's going to come. However, I do know that the only way that we will weather it successfully is with the people who would be the recipients of this.
I was just gonna say, I feel, I mean, it makes sense to me as far as, you know, how we did assume that we were gonna be out almost $1 million, not knowing that we were, knowing that in March we had to purchase all of those different pieces. So I am thankful for that, thankful for the budget presentation that, you know, shows that the process that we started as a board 8 years ago to try to get us to the right to where we had a balanced budget, and being able to do that last year and then this year as well, to be able to have those funds. But ultimately, you know, my personal opinion is yes, if things go well and things pass and at the November election and we can look at making something more sustainable, of course we should do that. But whether it can be sustainable or not, I still feel very strongly personally that one-time gift to the teachers for the work that they have done, to pay them for that is more than needed for the stress that they have been under and the different and more responsibilities they've all taken on. And the service personnel, some of them who worked, you know, and volunteered even all summer delivering meals, and the janitors and the extra, you know, custodian work that has taken place. So I think there's, in my personal opinion, I don't think it is it obviously any money is substantial money, it's taxpayer money, but I do also feel that it is a right thing to do, personally, to be able to try to relieve some of that, because I do know personally from many staff that they have had a lot of their own expenditures, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Bringing things into their classroom and preparing extra things to make sure, or buying lots of extra notebooks and whatnot, so they didn't have to have kids touch things, or, you know, all the things that we don't necessarily think about in bus drivers, and making sure that their buses are cleaner than, you know, even than is required. So, to me, I feel like it's the right thing to do. And so, that's my personal thought on it.
I also agree with Laurie. I think that, you know, individuals have spent a lot of their own money and a lot of their own time, and I wish we could find more of this type of money, but I think if we have a small amount like this at this time, it's only a nice thank you to that staff that worked so hard.
We would not be in the situation we are in right now had those people not jumped in and made it possible for these kids to be back in school. They deserve this, and I move that we do this.
All right, well then I think we just need a motion to move forward with the COVID-19 one-time allocation compensation.
I think Gary made that motion,
Yeah.
didn't he?
Mr. Cable, were you making that motion when you said I moved this?
Yes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cable. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Any further discussion or questions?
I'm just gonna abstain. Is this the time to do that? Or-
You would either
You
vote
would vote
yes or
yes
you
or
vote
no.
no. If you don't wanna do it, you vote no.
Okay. It's just unclear. I know that, you know, I did ask for some verification that it was okay to use the COVID funds, and,
I think
I'm
Dr.
concerned.
Gibson, though, just so you know, just so it's clear in your mind, so you feel comfortable with the vote, Dr. Gibson just explained that because we had the COVID CARES Act, that we were able to provide much of the money that we had already spent out of the general funds,
right.
and be able to then use the COVID funds for that. So this funding will come out of the general fund,
Right.
not the COVID fund.
Yeah, I understand. It's just different from the way it was presented last time, so it's just, I have new questions. So I'm all for supporting the teachers and service personnel with, you know, more than 500, and I would expect that they would be reimbursed anyway, that, you know, this, but I would have to, if I can't abstain, then I would have to say no.
Okay, well, let's just call it to a vote then. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Bruce?
Okay, so one opposition. Yeah, I wish we could add a few zeros to the end of that, but
Yes.
it is what it is, and at least it's a bit, you know, better than nothing at this point. Do we-
Start.
It's a start. Is there an executive session this evening?
No, ma'am.
All right. Any other comments or discussion? All right, then 8:29, meeting adjourned. Enjoy your evening.